In this video, I'm going to walk you through opening up After Effects for the first time, creating a new project, a new composition, and cover some of the most important tools and features of the interface. This is what it's going to look like when you first open it up, and then I'm going to click New Project, and here I have got a new project. Now with After Effects, it's extremely important that you work in a very organized manner. So the first thing I'm going to do is save the project with a name that makes sense and into a folder where I'm going to keep all of the assets, all of the footage, all of the elements I'm going to be using for this project. It's all going to go into that folder. Okay, so first thing, save the project, save as, and I'm going to call this Getting Started, and I'll save it to the Getting Started folder on my desktop. We're going to walk through some of these different panels as this video proceeds, but what I want to talk about first is this panel. This is the project panel. This is where we're going to keep all of our footage elements. So this is all, by the way, After Effects calls everything that goes into a composition footage. So whether it's a still image, whether it's video, whether it's audio, that's all footage. Sometimes I call it assets because that's what we call it in other applications. So I tend to use those two terminologies interchangeably. I'm going to try and stick to footage for this video since that is what After Effects calls it. So as I mentioned at the beginning, that it's really important to work in an organized manner. After Effects projects can get really complicated and really messy really fast. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to create some folders over here. I'm going to click on the folder button and I'm going to name it 00 underscore, and you can call this render comps, main comps, something like that. I'm going to call this one render comps. And the reason I do the numbers is so that when you click on show by name, you're going to list this by name, these folders will stay in a specific order, and that's really important for helping you keep organized and work efficiently. Okay, so next one will be, this will be 01 underscore precomps, and we'll talk perhaps in another video about what precomps are. I'm not sure we'll cover it in this video. Okay, so that's precomps. And then we're going to have our footage, so 02 underscore, that'll be footage. Now within footage, you very often have additional folders, and I don't number these. So in here I might have AI, that would be for Illustrator files. And then I might have images, and this could be JPEGs, PSDs, anything basically that's been created in Photoshop. Images. Let me make sure that goes in there. If I have this highlighted and then I add a new folder, it automatically goes in here. And then in here I'd also have one for audio. Okay. Now with the renders comp selected, I'm going to create a new comp. And you can just press Command N or go up here to New Composition. And my suggestion is whenever you come up here to choose a menu item and you see a key command, don't use the menu item from here. Go back and use the key command. That way you get used to using key commands. Command N. That's our composition settings. Let's name this something that makes sense. Don't just leave compositions named comp 1, 2, and 3. So this is going to be, I'm going to name this the same as the project. So this will be Getting Started. And I want to run through some of these things. Here you've got a list of presets. We're going to be working in HDTV, which is high definition, high quality. The aspect ratio is 16:9, and the actual width and height in pixels is 1920 by 1080. We are using square pixels. For this comp, I'm going to stick with 2997, which is the default. If you've ever looked at animation, those little flip books, you know, and you see each page, on each page you see an illustration. Maybe it's a character raising his or her arm, and on each page the arm goes up, 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 and then comes down, 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 down. So the arm goes up and down, but you have multiple frames to create this illusion of motion, and that's what the frames per second is. It's how many frames per second you're going to use to create the motion. And generally speaking, the higher number of frames per second, the higher the quality. And this is for the United States, by the way. For Europe and Asia, 24 frames per second, I believe, is the standard, 2405. It used to be film was always shot at 23,976. If you're combining your motion graphic with video, you need to know the frame rate of the video, and then that would be the frame rate you're going to use in your composition setting. Resolution. This has to do with the resolution on your screen, and the default is to be at half resolution, just so that your renders, your previews, and so forth will render more quickly. If you have it at full res and you're working in full HD as we are, sometimes it can go pretty slow. So this does not affect the final output. Here's where you will set up the duration. And this is our time code. And going from the right, the first 00, that's the frames. The next one are seconds. The next one are minutes, and then hours. So the default, I think, is 30. I'm going to just change this to 4 right now. Now, usually I'll have a pure white or a pure black background and then modify it as my composition goes on. So I'm going to change this just to black. Say OK. So this is our composition window. So this is where we see the animation. This is where we see everything happen. And down here, this is our timeline. This is where we do most of the work. This is where we create keyframes and all of that sort of thing. And then we see the results up in here. Sometimes we actually work up in here, but mostly our work is going to be down here. If you hover over any of these panels and hit the tilde key, and on a Mac, that's in the upper left corner right below the escape key. It's the little wavy symbol, and that will take that panel full screen, any panel. And this is really very valuable, particularly if you're working on a single monitor, particularly if you're on a laptop, because the desktop space is very limited and After Effects takes up a lot of room. Let's make sure we're in the same workspace. So I'm going to Window, Standard, Workspace, and I could reset the workspace to make sure that mine looks the way yours probably does. This is the composition that I've got open. This is what we're seeing in here. So let's just create some kind of an object so that we can start looking at some of the features, the tools, the properties in the timeline. I'm going to just take the shape tool here and take a rectangle, and I'm just going to click and drag. And if I hold down the Command key and the Shift key, I will drag from the point where I clicked, and then Shift key will constrain it so it's a perfect square. So now I've got a shape here. One thing that's very important is this little button here, Title Action Safe. So if you're doing anything for broadcast television, this is very important. It's not as important on the web, but for television, you need to pay attention to this. So what we have here is, if I go in from the right here, this first line, that is action safe for high definition, for widescreen. The second one, this is title safe for widescreen. So that means that all of your main action needs to stay inside this first frame, and all of your titles, your logos, and all of that should stay inside this second frame. Now the third and fourth frame, these are for standard def television. If you are doing something that's called center cut, sometimes studios still create graphics that are center cut. Center cut means that the graphics are designed so that they all stay within the parameters of the standard def television, so that the few people who still have standard def television can see them. If everything was done out to the title safe of HD, it could fall off the screen on a standard def television. We will not be dealing with standard def television. Let's take a look at the timeline here. This is a shape layer, and the shape layer has many different properties that we can manipulate, that we can animate. It has many more from this drop-down menu that we can add. That is going to be covered in another video. Right now, I'm just going to twirl up contents. I want to talk about transform. This is our transform properties down here. We've got anchor point, position, scale, rotation, and opacity. These are things that we animate frequently. There are many other things that we can animate, but these are sort of the mainstay, the things that get animated all the time. And the way you create an animation is you would create, first of all, a keyframe just by clicking on this circle. This is supposed to represent a stopwatch. To create the first keyframe, you click on the stopwatch. After that, if you change the properties, change the values right here of this property, it will automatically create a new keyframe. So now we have our first animation. We're just animating opacity. And I am just pressing the space bar to preview my animation. All right, so we're going to go through these in detail in another video. I want to talk about this bar up here. So right here we have the current time indicator. And when we move this around, this is where we are in time. So what we're seeing here in the timeline are indicators for frames. So this is 12 frames. This is 1 second, which is actually 30 frames, and so forth. You can jump through frames by using these arrows over here in the far left column of the timeline. This lets you jump between frames very quickly. This bar right below the time indicator, this is your work area. And the work area is really important. It comes into play when you're rendering. The default for rendering a composition is to render the work area. You can change that if you want, but you often want to change your work area. Sometimes you want to preview just a section of a composition. So then you'd set the work area for just that piece of animation. So the way we would modify the work area, you can click on the blue bars here and drag them, or you could hit B for begin and N for end. Now that's our work area. And you see I hit the preview button, the space bar, and now I'm only previewing the work area. To get to the beginning of the composition, on a Mac you can hit the home key if you have the extended keyboard. Often I will talk about go home. So go home, that means you go to the top of the top means also the beginning. So the beginning, the top, home all mean the very start of the composition. I'll just drag this all the way out. Down here at the bottom, this scales in and out of the timeline. So this can be very handy. If it's all the way to the left, you're going to see the entire timeline. No matter how long your composition is, it will make it all fit in the timeline that you can see. But if you have it all the way to the left, and then you can zoom in by sliding this to the right. These will quickly give you some preset settings. I think that's it for this video. In the next video, we're going to dive in here a little deeper and get into some more of the details of what all these different panels can do.